Hey everyone, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Women of DevOps. And today we're joined by Stefania Chaplin. Hi.
Hi Rox, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. To start, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Stefania Chaplin. I am a solutions architect for EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa, working for cybersecurity. So, very much background in security, DevSecOps, and I used to be a developer a while ago as well.
Very nice. You're actually my first DevSecOps woman. I've been dying to talk about this stuff. So, what got you involved in the field, and has security always been a passion of yours?
So it's interesting with the passion question, because I often find when I'm talking to clients and I'm talking about developers and DevSec and about developers or people with an interest in security are either really passionate or really paranoid. And I think I'm definitely evolved, because it used to be interest, then it became passion. And now I'm, disseminating my knowledge in my friends and network group about, guys, we have to be careful about phishing emails. They have so it's one of those roles that kind of just happened. I think I got it originally through recruitment, but my entire mentality with life is always go for growth and you'll always be employable. So I find that working in cybersecurity, as long as there's money and tech is growing, it's probably going to be hackers. So security is a fairly safe bet.
Oh yeah. My partner is actually a DevOps manager and he's super interested in DevSecOps too. So it's like this has like a special interest for me. So
Awesome.
let's talk security a little bit. What does the phrase security is like an onion mean to you?
Sure. So one of the first talks I saw, it was at a virtual event. Before virtual was cool, like, this was years ago, before it was everywhere. But I saw a talk, I think it was at All Day DevOps, and it was talking about security, but it was in relation to a house. So you would say, okay, so you've got some valuables in your safe. And it's like, okay, and you've locked the front door, but the safe door is open and the window, if someone breaks through the front door, they can just walk in and get to the safe. So that was one slide and it was all stick figures. And then the next slide, they're like, okay, what do you want to do? You want to lock the safe. You want to lock the windows. You want to have a really good multiple door locks. You want to have a perimeter fence. You want to have someone driving around in a car around the fence. You want to have CCTV. And I think that's what it kind of resonates to me, because security is an onion. You need all these layers, and it's so accurate, because you're as strong as your weakest link. And if you only have a front door lock, guess what? If that fails, which ultimately everything will fail, then you need to have backups in place to help with that.
That's perfect. What are some challenges that someone could face when trying to implement security policies?
I think it really depends who you are. Because if you're a CISO, I think the challenges are going to be slightly different. Because you can kind of try and do what you want. If you're a developer that has an interest in security, but you don't necessarily have the clout, something that you can do is, have the research. Like, I speak a lot to developers, I'm an X1, and there's loads of free tools that you can just try out. And it's like, why don't we scan our application? Why don't we see, if we do have any vulnerabilities, and do we even know what they mean? Like, I talk a lot about username enumeration, because I ask developers, I ask security, I'm like, what does that actually mean to you? And the developers start talking about like type enum, and I get that. And then I tell them what it actually means, and they're like, oh yeah, that thing, that's affected me in the past. So I think it really depends, who you are. If you're a security manager as well, then you've got the whole thing of like, okay, this is my domain and I have a remit, but where do I start? So I think there's, and then you have the whole policy. It's like, who controls the policies? Who do I need to speak to? And then you get layers of bureaucracy. So I think it really depends on who you are and what you're trying to implement, but it's it's a big topic you've got in that question.
Mm-hmm. So let's say it's for a U type. Have you ever gotten pushback?
So I'm in a unique position because I work for a cybersecurity vendor. So I normally advise kind of clients in terms of what I would recommend. And what I tend to recommend is almost like do a security audit. Like, just see, have you looked at your open source? Have you looked at your perimeters? Let's do a couple of scans and see where the most red flashing lights are. And then maybe we address that. For example, at Secure Code Warrior, in DevOps, you always talk about shifting left. Secure Code Warrior is about starting left. It's like, actually, why don't we, upskill and inspire our developers to write secure code, because then we won't have vulnerabilities in the application. So it's very much about, looking at the scope of the project and then going for the high priority, like what's on fire, let's fix that first.
This wasn't in my list, but I'm a little bit more, I'm interested in your company. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What brought you to them?
Sure. So I work for Secure Code Warrior, and our vision is to kind of inspire developers to ship quality software. It's a very preventative, human-led approach. And what we do is, if you look at where code vulnerabilities are introduced, it's at the code level. But if you look at where it's found, it's normally found at the testing level. And I think security in the past 10 years, the attitude's been, let's just add more and more testing. We've got static testing, we've got dynamic, we've got runtime, we've got all the ASTs, application security testing tools, DAS, SAS, RAS. It's now, my favorite now is I just use a capital X because that means cross. So it's like all of the tools. And unfortunately, you can't scan your way to secure code. You can scan your way, you can find the problem, and security are like, yeah, we found the problem, there's a problem. And then the developers, the favorite thing I like to say, I have on a slide, is developers find a way to fix the problem. Is it the best way? Is it an efficient way? Are they happy that is it confusing for them? Do they even know what they're doing? That's a different question. So what we try and do is we help upskill them, and we do this as well in a gamified format. So we have structured learning, we have tournaments, and what we're trying to do is make it fun, because I often when I talk to developers, I'm like, oh, how was it, doing this tournament, winning these prizes versus sitting in a non-ed corner room for 2 days on classroom-based training. And you can have gamified, you can have non-gamified, you can do structured learning, you can have integrations with ticket management, IDs, etc. So it's very much about understanding the developer and helping inspire them and upskilling them so they don't introduce these security vulnerabilities.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So out of all the areas of DevSecOps, what is your favorite aspect to work with?
Oh, I was thinking about this question, and there's just so many. It's so hard, because I personally really like learning things, and I find a lot of the aspects interesting because my background, I'm a developer. Then I went to go work in security, but I've never done ops. So I find that really interesting, but I don't work in it that much. And I talk a lot about cloud security because you see the growth of the cloud, like you see the revenue numbers for like AWS last quarter was 30% year-on-year growth, like I think 13, I don't know, million or billion. It was a big number. It was 13, but and the other GCP and Microsoft are growing 40, 50%. So you see this growth in cloud, and it's like, guess what? There's going to be security vulnerabilities. So I'm really enjoying kind of playing around with that. But then there's kind of the whole other aspects, because you've obviously got the code that's being written, you've got API, you've got different ways of accessing. So you've got, web versus mobile, desktop. And so, there's just so much. So that hasn't helped. I want to say everything, but hopefully those were a couple of the ones to inspire others.
Everything is a valid answer. So I saw that you have a computer science degree. So how do you feel about boot camps?
Yeah, well, this is the irony. I don't talk about this bit too often, but when I was doing my computer science degree, I remember in first year, I was like, why have I done this? I just want to be a makeup artist. I don't want to do tech. So I nearly changed my degree so many times. I had further maths at school, so I was always mathsy. So I was capable of it, but I wasn't really enjoying it. But the reason I did computer science, it was pre-Lehman Brothers. And I was like, computers are going to be in the future no matter what. I don't know what I want to do. I'm only 17. And if I do it, I'm going to be sorted for life. And then I graduated, and then I went to go work in makeup. Then I actually worked in like sales, recruitment, HR. I jumped a lot in my 20s. And I think it was around 27 when there was a lot of, I want to say political instability, like Brexit vote, a bit of Trump. Like it was that summer. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a girl that can code. I'm a unicorn. But what I found the challenge was I had not done anything technical in about 3 or 4 years. So actually, I kind of did a self boot camp. So I had the foundations, like a bit like, from school and like from learning. But what I ended up doing was going to meetups 3 or 4 times a week. I was doing online courses. So I did like lots of Udemy ones. I think it was Code Academy. That was the other one. So I was really, although I was working during the day, like in HR, in the evenings, I'd either be networking or, learning. So I did kind of a self boot camp for like 6 months. And then I managed to get, I got a GitHub portfolio, and then I managed to get a job at a startup. So I'm really pro boot camps, but I just say with any type of learning, it's important to have a kind of almost a portfolio at the end. And I know, because I know what it's like. A lot of people are like, oh, but it's not good enough. But that's fine, because then you'll show progression, because you're like, oh, I wrote this 2 months ago and I know that it could be better because of XYZ. Maybe I'll refactor it one day, but now look what I can write. I'm an amazing, excellent learner. So yeah, I'm a really pro of boot camps, online learning, anything, as long as you have an output at the end which you can then use to be employable, etc.
That's really great. Okay, you mentioned girl in tech, so I'm gonna go off of that. What has your experience been like so far as a woman in tech?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've jumped around a lot, as I mentioned in my career. I worked in makeup, which was almost all women, and gay men. Then I worked when I was in sales, recruitment, HR, etc. It was actually about 50-50. And then working in tech, it's obviously majority men, but actually my current company, Secure Code Warrior, our diversity is awesome. Like it's like, 40-50% women. Like it's amazing. Wow. I love it. I know. Nice. And the other places I worked, the stat was more like 4 or 5%. So I'm used to the industry. But what I find is I kind of use it, I say I use to my advantage, but I'm all about, inspiring future women to, be in tech and speak, because it's a great place to be. You'll be employable, you'll earn money. And also what I find as well is, while sales and recruitment was a bit cutthroat, in tech, because of the collaborative environment, the background of, say, open source and how people want to work, intelligent people are working together and collaborating to fix problems. What I find is that everyone's really helpful. And they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to work with you on this project. You just have to, as long as you brief them, appropriately, be like, hey, I'm working on this. I kind of have to not prove it, but look, I know what I'm talking about. This is what I need. What do you think? Then actually everyone's really receptive. And I've had some great collaborative projects globally. And I'm not gonna say it's because of being a woman, but I think sometimes it helps because it does make me stand out a bit more. So, use it to my advantage.
It's a pretty positive experience then.
Yeah, so positive. Well, that's the thing. When I was in other industries, being a woman wasn't as positive, but tech, yeah, it's going great.
It's so weird. I get such broad answers with that. I've had some women that have had super great experiences. I've had women that have had the worst experience ever. It seems like it really depends.
Yeah.
On the person. Yeah.
I was at a friend's birthday dinner maybe a month ago, and I was talking with someone who was working in an organization. It was airlines, but more in the cargo department. And then they were telling a story of how they were the one woman and there was 12 men. The attitude was very 1950s, and she actually was referred to in the meeting as the woman. And it was and I think it was like, oh yeah, it's great she's here taking the notes. And I'm like, I'm really grateful I've had that derogatory treatment towards me, because if it was, I was like, excuse me, do you know who you're talking to? So yeah, tech so far has been good. I found that, people are willing to listen to what I have to say because it's great. So,
So in order to help other women have the kind of experience that you have then, is there any advice you could give to men to help women feel more welcome and comfortable going into tech?
Yes, I think in tech in general, the men have been okay. So I will talk about this, and it's not specifically in tech, but I read a lot of feminist literature, and there was one. It was more like a help guide. I think it was the feminist, something like Bad Bitch Bible or something. I don't know. I'll find it. But it was saying it had a whole chapter. Stuff like mansplaining, man-interrupting. So when a man explains something, like my American friend who's English. Someone had tried to explain Brexit to her, and she's like, I lived in the UK for the first 18 years of my life, thanks. Or being explained one's hormonal cycle. I'm like, we don't need, I know. But actually, those kind of things, which I think some men, because they're like, yeah, I'm ambitious and I want to be the voice and I want to go ahead. They can overshadow women sometimes. And I think women, because of, society, culture, the world, they can sometimes be a bit more, quiet, reserved, even submissive. So I think having, the way to be a strong ally for women in tech is reach out to to any women you're working with, because there probably aren't that many, and be like, hey, how's it going? Just wanted to, touch base. Let me know if you need any help, anything. I'd love to collaborate with you. Or, obviously don't make it sound like you're trying to do their job and you think that they're not very good, but just in kind of a friendly atmosphere. And then obviously when you're in a meeting, if anyone does interrupt or speak over a woman, it would normally, in my instance, be a man, I'd be like, oh, sorry. Yeah, Rox, what were you saying? And then kind of looping that back in. And then if necessary, going to the man who interrupted, just, you know, on the sides, you know, not in public, be like, oh, FYI, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you have a habit of interrupting, and don't just point at the woman, be like, yeah, it was, you know, Tom as well, or whatever. Because I think sometimes when women feel, you know, interrupted or like, you know, demeaned, that can really make them shell up. I mean, that's not what you want. You want to have, you know, you want women to have a voice. And I think that can be hard sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was a video not long ago that went viral. It was this woman in STEM. She was in a college class. She just like recorded every time she got interrupted by another man in her class. And I think it was something crazy like 17 times or something.
Whoa.
Yeah. So not cool.
Exactly. Yeah, and I saw there was a meme, and it was like a woman, I think it was in science, but she was speaking at a conference, and then the man, you know, someone in the audience was like, oh, yeah, actually what you're saying is wrong. You need to read, I don't know, McGregor et al. Research. And she just moved her hair, and then on her name badge, it's like, I am McGregor et al. It's like that kind of thing. Like, don't basically, if you're a man, don't be a dick. That's my advice.
Yeah, that's great. Oh man. So this is not tech related at all, but when I was stalking your LinkedIn, I saw that you had a stint as a turtle conservationist.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Talk to me about that.
I hadn't thought about that in a while. Sometimes I forget it's on my LinkedIn, but yeah, when I was 17, so I'm based in London, so for me Mexico is far away. So I went to Mexico West Coast, like near Guadalajara, to go save turtles as like a 2-week conservation project. You know, for me it was very fun and character building because I'd been to like Western Europe, but I'd never, you know, traveled across the Atlantic before, and been to, you know, going to a country like Mexico where the climate, the culture. Thankfully, I speak Spanish, so that helped a bit. But it was, you know, it was a really, really awesome experience. And yeah, really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was great.
Nice. And before I let you go, is there anything else you would like to share?
Cool. Well, I was having a think about this because I always do loads of stuff. Like there's always like loads of public speaking. Obviously, this is a podcast, you know, there's loads of stuff with me, but I don't want to use this moment to talk about me. I want to talk, you know, use this moment to talk to whoever's listening to this or, you know, reading the transcript. And for me, my whole ethos is about improving diversity. Because I remember when I started in tech, I didn't have any, I remember actually, I noticed in my team there were no women, and then I joined the global call on the Friday afternoon of my first week, and there were like 15 men, and I was like, oh, I'm the only woman. So I kind of decided at that point, and there were no women in senior leadership either. So I was like, I'm going to need to be the role model that I want to see so I can inspire others. And then I remember when we had an America trip, and it was the board of, you know, one of the board of directors came, and she was like a really good VC. It's actually Anne Wimblad. She's awesome. And I actually put my hand up. It was only my 3rd or 4th month. And I was like, hey, what can we do to improve diversity? And she said visibility. And I really took that on board, which is why I have a habit of always saying yes to everything, doing business development for my own events, because I think if I put myself out there, it will encourage future generations. Because unfortunately, if we look at the world, we're not all, you know, middle-aged white men. But when we look at tech, that's the dominant demographic. So it's really about having those other, you know, people, you know, other types, those different viewpoints, so that we can work together, you know, diversity, inclusion, bring them all. And I think, at least for me, it starts with public speaking. So if there are people out there, you know, and you don't have to, start vlogging, do an internal presentation to your team about something you learned on the weekend or in the evening or something cool, or, you know, data or whatever. And then you can like slowly branch out, because you know, that's another thing about being a woman. Conferences love me because I'm like, hi, I'm a woman in tech and I'm going to talk about something technical. And it's like, quick, keynote. So yeah, to anyone who's out there reading or listening, have you thought about public speaking? So yeah, that's my closer.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.